the department of history, headed by Father Dr. Babu Joseph, and headed by Department Media Program and Deacon Haidu, just undergo total management of IPS college. We warmly welcome going to be the event and beautifully or very thought-provokingly the entire course.
But the audio is not of the Google Meet which is coming.
Something like I think the constraints of the history and the way of art is being carried by many in different ways. Not one of those groups like the 19 conserving art in Mumbai has titled the entire discourse on sustaining of pollination. This is not the discourse that is built around. And we also know that pollination, for example, just look at one of the aspects of the history is not a one-time event and it is continue. Even as we try to ask people to follow persons who participated and conquered and the nature, we also feel that in the present. And therefore, we need persons, and especially the stories, to think good things and to provide us a vantage point from which we can understand and we can get to know how a person is and where a person is moving. There's this kind of an angst on the one hand and the desire to understand and know in greater depth where we are and what we should do as a unit brought us to this webinar. I would like to thank once again Vincent Gila, and I would like to thank everyone who has joined us. In this simulation, I was looking for a community located in Himalayan, Eastern Himalayan mountains. It's our own little effort, and I would like to show to you, for example, one of the work that we did with the Institute of Advanced Studies on Christian education and the making of modern democratic future. Young people on our Institute of retired over there. And we did something on Christianity and Indian culture, I think both Professor Ashish Yogi and Professor P.K. Human were here in the same auditorium. And now we are happy that we have Professor Ramsey with us in our own auditorium in the virtual sense, explaining to us and providing us, all of you, the listeners, how we can understand the study by having a follow-up with these few words of mine. And once again, it's very warm. I'm heartily welcome each one of you and Mr. Sir over to you and
Thank you, Father. Today's webinar. Yes, thank you, Father. Today's webinar is also being streamed live on YouTube thanks to the brilliant efforts of Mr. Dhiru Subba, Ms. Yadika Prasad, and the entire team. Right now, there is a stampede of sorts going on. In a sense, a lot of people are trying to access both the YouTube channel and Google Meet. So we are having quite a bit of time trying to grant access to everyone. Now, before introducing our speaker today, I would like to lay down. I would like to lay down some ground rules for the participants. These are basically aimed at ensuring efficient and better communication. All participants are requested not to unmute their microphones. They can use the chat forum on the right side of the Google Meet to jot down their questions. Please stick to one question and one supplementary question if required. Do remember that we will not be able to take all the questions since we already have a large number of questions sent to us through email, and we will also be polling questions through live chat from YouTube. Now it is my honor and privilege to introduce our most esteemed speaker, Dr. Ramachandra Guha. Though for me, it would essentially be like a firefly trying to introduce the sun. Much as the sun does not need an introduction, so do Dr. Ramachandra Guha. But for sake of etiquette, Dr. Guha is a historian and a biographer. His research interests include environmental, social, economics, political, contemporary, and cricket history, among many others. He is also a pioneering environmental historian. His works include India After Gandhi, India Before Gandhi, The Last Liberal, Anthropologist Among the Marxists, How Much Should a Person Consume, and my personal favorite, Savaging the Civilized, Environmentalism and Global History, The States of Indian Cricket, among many, many others. In 2019, the American Historical Association bestowed upon Dr. Ramachandra Guha its prestigious honorary foreign member prize, making Dr. Guha the third Indian to receive the award, after Sir Jadunath Sarkar and Dr. Romila Thapar. In 2011, he was conferred with Sahitya Academy Award for his book India After Gandhi. In 2009, he was bestowed with Padma Bhushan by the Government of India for his contribution to history. Dr. Guha was also awarded with Ramnath Goenka Prize for Excellence in Journalism, the Indian Pulitzer. As a mass communication scholar, I find it intriguing for a historian and a journalist to meet so remarkably in one man. Indeed, sir, you are an inspiration to us all. Thank you and welcome once again. Now, without much ado, let us begin our conversations with Dr. Ramachandra Guha. Now, I want to add, a lot of people are still coming, and we'll be adding to I will be requesting all the participants to jot down their questions. So let us begin with the questions. Dr. Guha, the first question that I would like to put forward is by a student. Her name is Sagarika Bhujel. She is from Salesian College. She asks, we students are often asked as to why you choose history as a course of study. What was it that sparked your interest in history?
Well,
I know you. Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
I know that you studied economics both at undergraduate and postgraduate levels, isn't it? And went on to do your doctoral research in the social history of forestry in Uttarakhand, focusing on Chipko movement, which was also later published as the book The Unquiet Woods. What was it that sparked your interest in history?
So first of all, thank you for having me, and thank you everyone, wherever you are. There's an outside chance that the network may not be very good because I'm in the Nilgiris in Tamil Nadu, where the connection is not, shall we say, optimal. Well, as Barun said, I have actually never studied history in my life. My degrees, formally studied history in my life. I did science in high school. My degrees were in economics, my BA and MA, my PhD in sociology. But history, unlike, shall we say, mathematics or physics or the law, is something you can pick up even if you do not formally study it. And sociology and history are very akin. It's like biology and chemistry today, or physics and mathematics in the past. They're closely connected disciplines. And the course of my research into the Chipko movement, which was a movement of peasants to protect the Himalayan forests, I discovered that such movements had a long history extending to the 19th century. And I moved into the archives, and the important the fundamental precondition of doing original historical work is that you must have new primary material from the archives. And I was able to find a vast array, indeed a treasure trove of materials, both in the National Archives in Delhi and in the UP State Archives in Lucknow, about the history of forests and peasant protests in the Himalaya from the late 19th century. And it's through that I became a historian really. From my work in Chipko, I moved into other subjects. I wrote on cricket, I wrote on Gandhi, I wrote on contemporary history, and in some ways I'm a sociologist turned historian, is how I would describe myself. And one last thing I'd say. This question comes from a student who is a student of history. But a love, appreciation of history should be part of one's general education. Reading interesting, complex stories about the past, whether it's our country or any other country, could enrich the mind of a physics student, a mathematics student, a law student, a music student. So history does not require any special training or expertise to appreciate its nuances.
Thank you so much, Dr. Guha. We'll move on to another question. The second question is from Javed Naveed from Aligarh University. He asks, as a historian, how would you define the term secularism? Is there any difference between Western concept of secularism and the Indian concept of secularism?
So first of all, there is no single Western concept of secularism, and there is no single Indian concept of secularism. These terms are hotly contested, and they're used hotly contested in the West and in India. Conventionally, secularism has been taken to mean two things. One is at the level of politics, a separation of faith from state. So, for example, in England, the Queen is still head of the Church of England, but France does not have a king or a queen and does not have an established church that is merged with the government. Secondly, secularism is taken to mean in everyday life religion retreating into the private domain. So, I go to a temple as part of my faith as a Hindu. Somebody else may go to a mosque as part of their faith as a Muslim, but it does not affect the interaction of these two individuals or how they behave in the school or the college or the office or the playground. Now, so one position, which is the kind of hardline Western position, is that the state must be outside the sphere of religion and may sometimes even be anti-religion. What India adopted was a position slightly more different. It was that the state should be equidistant, should not prefer one religion to another, but should not stay away or be antagonistic to religion. Some states were explicitly antagonistic to religion, and the communist states in particular, for example, Soviet Union or China, systematically attacked. In China, there was a systematic attack on Buddhist monasteries, for example, right? Or in the Soviet Union, the Russian Orthodox Church, which used to be very, very influential, was dedicated to a subsidiary position. In India, we didn't do that. Now, I myself prefer the term pluralism to secularism, and interfaith harmony or interfaith tolerance to secularism. Because secularism is a term in India that has been greatly muddied by its misapplication, by the hypocrisy of many politicians in power. For some politicians, it has come to mean minority appeasement, and so on and so forth. And it's this politics of minority appeasement that unfortunately gave rise to the more dangerous politics of Hindutva majoritarianism. But Hindutva majoritarianism may not have existed had there not been minority appeasement, for example, by the Congress party, particularly under Rajiv Gandhi's regime. So I am absolutely opposed to mixing religion with politics. I believe that a person's faith is their affair, an individual affair. I believe all religions, like Gandhi, whose biography I wrote, I believe all religions are a mixture of truth and error. All religions need to be reformed. No religion gives equal rights to women. Every religion discriminates against some of its members in particular ways. So, but at the same time, I am absolutely opposed to faith and state being merged. I do not believe India should be a Hindu country. I do not believe Britain should be a Christian country. I do not believe Pakistan should be an Islamic country. If you mix faith and state, this leads to the persecution of minorities. In Myanmar, for example, the Rohingyas are persecuted because it declares itself as a Buddhist country. And if India was to explicitly declare itself as a Buddhist country, as a Hindu country, you will find that the minorities will be vulnerable and insecure. At the same time, religion will continue. I mean, aggressive atheism, which was kind of what was practiced in the Soviet Union, I don't think is practicable either. I mean, faith answers to an elementary human need. We are alone in this world. We come alone in this world, we leave alone. Now, how we seek consolation and spiritual solace through faith is our business. But it's very important in a multi-faith country like ours not to make one faith more important than the other.
Thank you so much, sir. I think you have, written a lot also through your columns, and on secularism. I want to go to another next question, which I believe is a logical continuation to what you have been talking. This is a question by Professor Irsad Ghulam Ahmed from Sikkim University, and he asks, historicizing myth and mythicizing history is to a large extent responsible for the erosion of secularism in recent times in India. Could you comment on this, please?
Well, I think there are many reasons for the erosion of secularism. Historicizing myth and mythicizing history is one reason. Partisan politics by partisan appeals to religion by political parties is another. In our country, I believe, every political party has pandered to one religious group or the other. The Congress has pandered to Muslims, the BJP has pandered to Hindus, and so there are many reasons for the decline of secularism in India. But in any case, I think secularism has become, unfortunately and tragically, a much discredited word. I would prefer pluralism. We must restore India's traditions of pluralism. Gandhi, Nehru, Tagore, Ambedkar, those who built the Indian Republic, were absolutely clear that this is not going to be a Hindu state, that every faith would have equal rights, and every faith must improve. I think it's very important to recognize that religious fundamentalism always militates against women. And here we can learn, for example, from progressive faiths elsewhere. For example, there are some Christian traditions that allow women bishops. Why can't we have women priests? Why can't we have women preaching in mosques? So I think these are the kinds of changes we need, rather than trying to restore some kind of pure ideal of secularism. We need three things. We need faith to be a private affair. We must make sure faith is never used to inflict violence on another person, another citizen. We need political parties not to use faith to garner votes. And we need to focus on the more important things of everyday life, which is economic growth, human dignity, social harmony, environmental sustainability. And I think that's the kind of forward-looking position we should take on these issues.
Thank you, sir. Let us take the discussion on secularism a bit further. Because yes, in a present situation and the circumstances we are facing, not just in India, but throughout the world, isn't it? Throughout the world, we are seeing things that are changing. Dr. Subhradip Dasgupta, Salesian College, asks, the use of the term vanishing secularism presupposes the presence of secularism in praxis, at least at some point of time in history. Can we at all identify such a moment of secularism in the country post-partition that we now claim is fast ebbing away? Can Yes, please go ahead.
Finish your question.
Okay. Can one single political party be identified that is truly secular? And this is interesting. At the macro level, is the mass of the country itself secular?
No, I think I'd take the second question first. Second comment first. It's more important. Politicians and governments make mistakes. politicians and governments are sometimes motivated by less than noble ideals. But this does not mean the people are always right. Ordinary folk also may have suspicions, prejudices, animosities, hatreds. And that is what your questioner's second statement points to. Are the mass of people secular? Maybe not. They're certainly religious, they're not secular. In that sense, they're not atheistic. They certainly believe in whatever religious tradition, spiritual tradition they may take. But it's important for politicians to bring out the best among the citizens, not stoke the worst, not stoke hatred and animosity. So Hindu fundamentalists, Muslim fundamentalists, Christian fundamentalists want to say my religion is superior than the others, and someone who is not of my faith is inferior and must be stigmatized, perhaps persecuted, perhaps attacked. The job of a leader is to bring out the best, to stoke the hatred and bring out the kind of more enlightened, open-minded vision. That's what Gandhi did. That's what Jawaharlal Nehru did. When India became independent in 1947, tragically, we were divided into two countries. And the part that left us, Pakistan, was constituted as an Islamic republic. And at the same time, Nehru said, whatever happens to minorities in Pakistan, whatever Pakistan does to its Christians and its Hindus, every Muslim and Christian in India has equal rights. Now, that is and he himself physically would go to stop rioting. And this was true of somebody. Someone asked which political party is truly secular. I would say some politicians have been. I'll tell you a story about Jyoti Basu. Jyoti Basu was Chief Minister of West Bengal, fighting for 17 years. He was not a great Chief Minister. He could have done better in economics. He did not encourage private enterprise. He could have done better in education, healthcare. But as long as Jyoti Basu was Chief Minister, there was never a communal riot in Bengal. Because he made sure that the state would protect the peace of ordinary citizens. I was myself living in Kolkata in 1984. Right. Now, you will remember, some of you will not have been born then, but you would have read the history. When Indira Gandhi was killed, there was a pogrom against Sikhs in North India. Rajiv Gandhi and Narasimha Rao did nothing while Sikhs were killed in Delhi. But in Kolkata, where there were 50,000 Sikhs at that time, many of them identified by their turban, many of them taxi drivers, and hence particularly vulnerable, Jyoti Basu told the police not a single Sikh would be killed. And not a single Sikh was killed. So he maintained the peace. And he said later, I owe it to the memory of Mahatma Gandhi. Because when Mahatma Gandhi went on his famous fast for Hindu-Muslim harmony in Kolkata in 1947, a fast that restored peace to a rioting city, Jyoti Basu was in Kolkata visiting Mahatma Gandhi. So communist was inspired by a Gandhian to promote peace. I'll give you one more example of a politician of this kind. Sheikh Abdullah. Again, like Jyoti Basu, Sheikh Abdullah is a controversial politician. One cannot defend many things he did. But in 1947, when the Hindus and Muslims were at each other's throat all across northern India, in Bihar, in UP, in Delhi, in Maharashtra, in West Punjab, in Sindh, in the northwest frontier provinces, in Jammu, in the valley of Kashmir, the Hindus and Sikhs were totally safe because Sheikh Abdullah went into Lal Chowk and made a speech to his Muslim fellow Kashmiris saying, not a single Hindu or Sikh will be touched. So this kind of principle, courage, if some of our politicians today take, that they are willing to risk their own life to protect vulnerable citizens, I think India would be a much better and happier place. So there have been some examples of political parties and individual politicians who have promoted interfaith harmony, and I wish there were many more.
Thank you, sir. Moving ahead, let's go more into your works. I mean, there are extraordinary number of questions, and some of the questions that deals with secularism, the idea of secularism, which you, I believe, to an to a great deal, you have already answered most of them. So I would like to make this more enriching in the sense that we will take into consideration a lot of area, try to cover a lot of area. So let's move on and let's go more into your works. Your works as such. Sankaran Iyer from Pondicherry University asks, you are both a biographer and a historian, isn't it? is there ever a conflict of interest between a biographer and a historian?
That's a very good question. Indeed, there is. You know, there are two kinds of biographies. One is most biographies are written about people you admire. You know, Barun was kind enough to mention that the favorite book of mine, so far as he is concerned, is a book called Savaging the Civilized. It's the biography of an anthropologist, very relevant. It's not the best known of my books, but it's a book I'm particularly attached to. Because Elvin was an extraordinary person. He was an Englishman who became an Indian. He was a priest who left the church. He was a middle-class person who lived with Adivasis and became the foremost spokesman for their rights. Now, Elvin was the reason I left economics for sociology. Elvin was the reason I got interested in tribals and ecology. So I spent several years writing about Elvin. And most biographies, when you write a biography, you write it because you like the subject so much, or you admire the subject so much. You know, sometimes it's different. No one can write about Hitler because they like Hitler. They write about Hitler because he had a very influential and negative impact on the world. But most biographies are written about people you like. And there's a danger that you fall in love with the subject, you iron out their flaws, you suppress their deficiencies, you overestimate their role in history, and so on and so forth. So it's a very complex and delicate balance, and it's very hard to strike. I mean, the question that was raised was very, very important. I mean, a biographer must always position their subject against the larger social and historical context in which they live, and must always recognize that they are as vulnerable human beings who have the same kind of flaws and anxieties that you might, and must, you know, one tends to, biographers always have to be cautious not to exaggerate their subject's achievements. I mean, someone writing about Tagore, for example, should not think that Tagore was the only great Bengali poet, or that, you know, the only great modern poet. You know, you'll find all of us are, you know, patriotic not only in a national sense that we love India, but also in a regional sense that we are devoted to our state. So you will find, you know, many Bengalis who think that there was no Indian poet as great as Tagore, but they haven't studied their works, they haven't looked at their influence. So this kind of partiality or excessive identification with your subject, your inability to historically scrutinize your subject's real significance, are pitfalls that a biographer must always be wary of.
Thank you, sir. Well, I think I must ask you this question because, I mean, you know, I mean, you have been, you are a biographer and a historian, and this will be a natural continuation to what you have just said, because I want to know whether you are Gandhi's biographer or a Gandhian biographer.
Well, I'm absolutely not a Gandhian. You know, I don't believe in celibacy. I like an occasional drink. I'm sure I've told a few lies in my life, so I'm not a Gandhian. You know, I'm not a Gandhian, and I'm a scholar of Gandhi, a student of Gandhi, who admires Gandhi, but with qualifications. The qualifications are, he made political errors, he has sometimes had simplistic views, he was an awful father and husband, and above all, he was one of many great Indians. For example, he was not, I spoke about Tagore, right? Now, many Bengalis seem to think there is Tagore and no one else. Now, in my view, Tagore was easily as great as Gandhi, and so was B.R. Ambedkar. I mean, if you read the second volume of my Gandhi biography, there are hundreds of pages on Gandhi's engagements with Tagore and Ambedkar. And you will get a sense that often in an argument, Tagore had the upper hand over Gandhi, or Ambedkar said more perceptive things about the caste system and how to end it than Gandhi. So I am certainly, of course, if I was not broadly an admirer of Gandhi, if I did not think he had a profound impact on the world, if I did not think his ideas were worth studying, his life was extraordinary, I would not have spent 20 years doing research and writing about him. But absolutely he had flaws, and my books, that's why I wrote 2,000 pages, because I had to write both about his colossal achievements and his flaws. I write about the human being, but also his historical impact. And in my view, Tagore and Ambedkar are among Gandhi's Indian contemporaries. Of course, there are people outside, but among Gandhi's Indian contemporaries, Tagore and Ambedkar are almost at Gandhi's level. Maybe at Gandhi's level, but certainly in the same league. As
Barun, yeah.
Go ahead.
Barun, one sec. Since sir had told us in our yesterday's meeting that I could occasionally intervene, and on this topic, I was in Stanford with Aishwari Kumar, who was heading the Department of History, and he made a comment that Indian intellectuals have not engaged with Gandhi sufficiently as Ambedkar did, and if India needs to move forward, Ambedkar's criticism or Ambedkar-Gandhi dialogue should be persisted and carried forward. What's your comment, sir?
I agree. I absolutely agree. And I've written extensively on this. As I said, the second volume of my Gandhi biography has several chapters on Gandhi and Ambedkar. The late D.R. Nagaraj, who was a dear friend of mine and a great Kannada intellectual, wrote a wonderful book called The Flaming Feet, which has come out in a new edition, taking the Gandhi-Ambedkar debate forward. I mean, it's a profoundly enriching and illuminating debate. And the important thing about that debate is that you do not have to take sides, and you should not take sides. You know, for many years, because Gandhi was the great hero of our freedom struggle, it was fashionable to denigrate Ambedkar and elevate Gandhi. Now, among radical left-wing intellectuals, it has become the reverse. It has become fashionable to denigrate Gandhi and elevate Ambedkar. You don't need to do that. They were both extraordinary people. You know, we can learn from both of them. They argued in their lifetime, but we don't have to conduct a posthumous debate between them as to who is the greater person. India in 2020 can draw in different ways from Gandhi and Ambedkar. And in all my writings, I have argued this. I wrote a piece in the Telegraph last year, showing how we can draw on Gandhi and Ambedkar both, you know, in a creative and productive way. And other people are also writing. I mean, there's, again, I talked about D.R. Nagaraj. There's a well-known Kannada writer called Devanur Mahadeva, who's always said, who's a Dalit, and who's always said, as Dalits, for us, Ambedkar comes first because he gave us dignity and self-respect. But as Dalits, we should also recognize that Gandhi opened the minds and hearts of the upper castes. So, praising Ambedkar must not be followed by abusing Gandhi. And I absolutely endorse Devanur Mahadeva's views. You know, for example, when you look at the rights of women, Ambedkar is ahead of Gandhi. When you look at environmental sustainability, Gandhi is ahead of Ambedkar. If you look at, you can learn from both of them in different ways. They're both extraordinary people, and India needed them both in the 1930s, and India needs them both today. And it's a profound error to use one to denigrate the other.
Barun, one more small intervention, since probably you are missing out on those who are typing in questions. There is from Kalpana Prasad, who was our former faculty, a question that probably more than secularism, it is dissent which is not tolerated by the state. Your comments, sir?
Very true. That's very true. That's very, very true. I would completely agree with it. You know, I myself have been the victim of, in a limited way, of different kinds of harassment and persecution by the state. Other people have faced it much more. You know, I have been deprived jobs because politicians called and said, you can't appoint this person professor. It hasn't hurt me because I'm still carrying out my writing. But other people have been hurt much more. Intellectuals, writers, filmmakers, social activists, and particularly in the last few years. It's not new. I mean, again, the Congress was equally guilty in the emergency. Many state governments are like this. One should not think it is only the Modi government. You know, Mamata Banerjee in West Bengal, your state does not really permit dissent. You know, that was true of, Shiv Sena when Bal Thackeray was in power, and so on and so forth. Absolutely. We are not, I would tell students to read an essay of mine, which is online, published in Scroll and also later in a book collection of mine. It's called Eight Threats to Freedom of Expression in India. It's a kind of an analytical history of how Indian democracy is imperfect. That writers, artists, scholars, filmmakers are much less free in India than they would be in a mature democracy like Canada or Sweden or Australia. And I explain this. So do read, particularly students who have a life ahead of them to expand freedom in India, to make India a more democratic place. Please read my essay, 8 Threats to Freedom of Expression in India. You type those words on Google, you'll get it on.
I have one question. This is a question that I would like to personally ask you. And this is very, I feel this is quite important in the sense that because you are both a biographer and a historian, and so how do we go about this? And take for example, Gandhi as a man was a failed father, a mediocre lawyer, and an abusive husband. Gandhi as a phenomenon was a powerful organizer, a man who understood how and what the multitude of the grassroots level Indians thought and desired. Gandhi, as a political and historic construct, was the Mahatma, the Messiah, who delivered Indians from British bondage, the father of the Indian nation. For a historian, how much is Gandhi merely a man, a phenomenon, and a concept?
Well, all of them, and that's why I had to, again, that's why I spent 2,000 pages to explore all of that at length. And the important thing about a biography, since several questions have been about biography, and your question also hints at that, important thing about a biography is that the biography is a work with many characters. A biography about Gandhi is also about Ambedkar, also about Tagore, also about Nehru, also about Kasturba, also about Harilal Gandhi, also about the viceroys like Irvin, also about journalists. And a biographer develops his subject, the character of his subject, in interaction with other people. It's like a playwright. A play has a hero, but there are many subsidiary characters through which you develop your main, the personality of the main character. And through those interactions, through the relationships, some relationships are complementary. The relationship between Gandhi and Patel is largely complementary. Some are adversarial, like between Gandhi and Ambedkar. And through these relationships, you bring out all the nuances of that person. Then, of course, you broaden the scope to their larger impact. Gandhi, the phenomenon, as you mentioned. What impact did Gandhi have? On politics, on society, on public life. What is his legacy? How is his legacy argued about? How was Gandhi perceived outside India? One of the extraordinary things about Gandhi is that he's living in a time when there's no internet, there's no television, there's no radio, but yet the world knows about him. How did Africans and Latin Americans and, Canadians get to know about Gandhi? That's also part of the resonance of Gandhi's influence. So a biography has to be all of these in, That's why I did 2,000 pages, because many biographies of Gandhi focus on him and on his writings. So there are 90 volumes of Gandhi's collected works that begin, their source material is just those collected works. But I had to go to different kind of archives. I had to read Ambedkar's writings, Tagore's writings. I had to look at the colonial states intelligence reports. I had to look at newspapers to build this many-sided view of Gandhi. It's like a Gandhi story is like an epic story. I mean, we are not talking about Ram. There's a Ramayana, but Ram is not the only figure in Ram. In the Ramayana. So Ram is also a flawed figure. Maybe one is not allowed to say it today, but the fact is that he was also a flawed figure. I mean, you should just have to ask Sita about Ram's flaws, for example. So likewise with Gandhi. Gandhi was also a flawed figure. If you ask his son Harilal, you would get a different picture of Gandhi. But at the same time, he was a person who made a colossal impact, and we have to recognize that too.
Thank you, sir. There is an interesting question asked by Mr. Arijit Kundu. And he asked that in the time of crisis, what is the duty of a historian? So how should a historian, when, in the middle of a crisis, like maybe COVID-19 pandemic that we are facing today, so how should a historian act? I mean, how should a historian chronicle, what are his duties in that?
So first of all, a historian is also a citizen. So the historian is also anxious. But a historian must never become an ideologue or a partisan. I believe that a scholar must never be a member of a political party. The scholar's intellectual integrity requires that he or she is autonomous not only of political parties, but of ideologies. You ask me, am I a Gandhian? I say, I'm not a Gandhian. Right. Now, Karl Marx famously said, I am not a Marxist, because there are so many people dogmatically following Marx, right? If Ambedkar was alive today, he would say, I am not an Ambedkarite, because no single philosopher, no single philosophy can unlock the truths to what the complexities of history. So a historian, but a historian is a citizen. If innocent people are lynched, a historian feels worried. If there's discrimination against a particular group like Dalits, a historian may feel anxious, who believes in the Indian Constitution. But their scholarly duty comes first. The rigor of research, the depth of analysis, the total commitment. History is a 24, like politics, is a 24/7 profession. You can't take holidays and go to Vipassana classes when you want, or listen to music for 4 hours a day, because it's a very difficult, complex. It's like being a musician. A musician needs to practice. They do riyaz. Indian classical music musician, even the greatest musician. You know, I recently, by the way, just to introduce a personal note, a great classical musician, who's a friend of mine, is the great Carnatic vocalist T.M. Krishna. Now, he is one of maybe two top South Indian musicians today. The other is Sanjay Subramaniam. And there's a furious argument between lovers of Carnatic music as to who is greater, Sanjay or Krishna, and both are great. But Krishna I have the privilege of counting as a friend, and I asked him, when do you do your riyaz? He said, sometimes in the middle of the night. You know, if I'm busy, I have to come back after my concert. I need 5 hours a day to practice. Even so, hard work and discipline and rigor is what will enable anyone, you know, to do could be a lawyer, could be a doctor, doesn't really matter, right? Now, so that comes, that is why I always hesitate. I am not an activist. I'm not even a public intellectual. I'm just a scholar who sometimes says things that are right, sometimes wrong. I like to write for the newspapers because you reach a wider audience. Very rarely do I come to the streets. You know, in the last 20 years in Bangalore, I've taken part in 2 protests. Once, when there was a steel flyover dispute that was going to destroy 2,000 trees, old trees in the heart of the city, when my wife and I went and held a banner. And the second time was last year in December, where as a biographer of Gandhi, I felt obliged to protest against the Citizens Amendment Act, non-violently, because I believe that act discriminates against Muslims, and Gandhi would have opposed it. And it's no accident that the protesters who were with me were carrying portraits of Gandhi and of Ambedkar. But by and large, I must suppress my activist side, my concerns as a citizen, and focus on scholarship, because one cannot be a part-time scholar.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, sir. I would like to take a question from Dr. Dinesh Chandra Ray, HOD Southfield College, and there is an interesting question, though it deals with secularism, but he takes, he says, is it really vanishing from Indian culture? Earlier we had talked, Dr. Supradeep Dasgupta had asked whether Indian masses were themselves secular or not, but is secularism itself vanishing from Indian culture? Had it existed, had it been a part of the Indian culture? And he also says, or should we accept Samuel P. Huntington, that we are going through the period of the class of civilization? Is secularism vanishing from Indian culture?
Well, I would say this: fundamentalism is rising. In my lifetime, aggressive public religiosity has risen, and I believe it's true in all religious faiths. Some of your teachers are from Kerala. Now, Kerala is a state I know very well. Kerala is a state which fortunately has not known major communal riots for 100 years, since the Mopla rebellion, of which is almost 100 years old. But Kerala is a state in which all 3 religions have aggressive rising fundamentalism. There's fundamentalism among Kerala Muslims, among Kerala Christians, and among Kerala Hindus. And that's risen over the last 20, 25 years. The aggression, the animosity, the suspicion of other religious communities is there among Hindus, Muslims, and Christians in Kerala. In Punjab, there is more fundamentalism among Sikhs today than there was, 50 years ago when I was a boy. I grew up in North India with many Sikhs, and you will find that there's more religiosity for the last few years. Among Jains, even a small community like Jains, they want to protect the institutions, they want to be declared a minority religion, even though they are so wealthy and affluent. So it is certainly the case. This is true all over the world. In America, Christians are getting more fundamentalist. In the Middle East, Muslims are getting more fundamentalist. In Burma and Sri Lanka, Buddhists are getting more fundamentalist. So it is a feature of the last 20, 30 years that in every religious faith, those who preach fundamentalism are becoming more influential, and those who preach tolerance and interfaith harmony are becoming less influential. That's true. That's true across the world of every religious faith, except with the exception perhaps of Europe, Western Europe, where faith is very much a private affair, in countries like Germany and France and so on. But elsewhere, I don't know whether secularism is vanishing, but fundamentalism is rising.
Yes.
Barun and
sir, can I just there is a continuation of the question. I would just like to put that question, sir, Father, and then you can move ahead.
Okay, carry on, carry on.
Yes. Dr. Dinesh Chandra Ray asks, should we accept Samuel P. Huntington that actually, because there is a rise of fundamentalism, isn't it? Which means that, secularism is kind of aiming whether, So are we, moving towards a class of civilizations in terms of fundamentalistic or religious concentration of ideas?
Okay, now, look, if you look at encounters between two faiths, now look at Hindus and Muslims in India. The encounter is now almost more than 1,000 years old. That encounter had both conflict and collaboration. Hindus and Muslims often lived in peace, sometimes they came into conflict. Sometimes they were tolerant of each other's views, sometimes they were intolerant of each other's views. And the job of an enlightened political elite in the 21st century is to follow Gandhi and focus on the harmony and tolerance. There will always be elements of conflict. And to insist on the conflict, to intensify the conflict, is to make it a self-fulfilling prophecy that there is an eternal clash between Abrahamic faiths and Indic faiths. So I don't believe history works in that way. History is molded by human beings. And it can be molded in emancipatory and progressive ways by human beings, and in destructive and savage ways by human beings. So and Islam and Christianity likewise. I mean, there have been the Crusades, but there were also examples of great borrowing. I mean, modern Western science drew a lot from Islamic traditions of science and engineering. Islam also may have learned from Christianity in different ways. Jesus is a prophet in the Islamic tradition. So it depends on human beings today whether they want to only stoke the rivalries and the prejudices and the animosities and the hatreds, and that is a part to disaster. And that's why enlightened political leadership of the kind that Gandhi or Sheikh Abdullah or Jyoti Basu once provided is so important in India.
Yes, sir. Yeah, profoundly, I endorse everything that you said, and precisely because you referred to Kerala, and that I think with regard to pluralism, the word you referred to, secularism, Nandi, studying the city of Kingdom, that all communities, and including the Jews that were there when you did the study, each of them thought they were the best. But interacting with everyone else, in that understanding that after all we negotiate, we relate. That's one side. And the other is, how do these kind of long, and there's nearly 2,000 years of coexisting or co-living. And I would like to refer to also individuals who take within society the kind of position that you are referring to, like Sri Narayana Guru. Within these three groups coming forward forthrightly to say, everyone is good and we can live without any official affiliation. And we find in America to the nones, no official religion group on the increase. So this refers also to Father Paul, who made an earlier comment that are we as Indian society are not sufficiently learning from the kind of experience of Europe of 1940s. This can happen, and doing this and bringing it forward and highlighting, as you said, whether it is Ambedkar, Gandhi or Narayana Guru or figures like that, or Tagore in locality, would be one way of rerouting our societal history. Would you agree, sir?
I completely agree, George. And I'm glad you mentioned Narayana Guru. I first read about Narayana Guru in the writings of an Australian scholar, Robin Jeffrey, who's a great historian of modern Kerala.
Yeah,
and then I found in my studies on Gandhi how much Narayana Guru had inspired Gandhi. The temple entry movement comes from Narayana Guru, right? And I've often told my Malayali friends, I've complained that unlike Ambedkar and Gandhi and Tagore, who are across India, Narayana Guru is a figure of veneration in Kerala, and they have not taken him outside the Malayalam-speaking world. We need a really good biography, an accessible biography, not a devotional biography by a worshipper, but a critical, analytical biography by a scholar that on Narayana Guru that can reach the world in the way in which I have written about Gandhi, or Aishwari Kumar is written about Ambedkar, or so many Shukanto Chaudhary is written about Tagore. You know, Tagore is not a Bengali figure because scholars have made him an all India figure or universal figure. Gandhi is not a Gujarati figure. Ambedkar is not a Dalit figure. But I've often, and I gently chastise my Malayali friend, that, someone like Narayana Guru, who's an extraordinary person. And, and Robert Jeffrey's book is important because he showed that the so-called Kerala miracle, the fact that in Kerala, gender equality is much higher than other parts of India, there's access to education and health in higher other parts of India, land reform. He said communists are taking all the credit, but there are many other people who have contributed. Narayana Guru and his SNDP, progressive Christians, progressive Maharajas who educated women, and there are many contributors to the Kerala miracle. And really, Narayana Guru is one of the most fundamental people. So you're right, absolutely right. In my state, for example, again, and biography. To go back to the question about biography, you see, when people want to read about history, the most accessible way of for an ordinary, not a professional historian, but a general reader, to learn about history is through biography. And you can, in Karnataka, in the state I live in, there was another great figure, Shivaram Karanth. There is no biography of Shivaram Karanth in English. He was a polymath, he was an environmentalist, he was involved in widow remarriage, he started a girls' school, popular science, he made films, he revived Yakshagana, a classical dance tradition, and what all he did, he was really a polymatic figure. He's much, if the diversity of Karnataka comes alive through the life of Shivaram Karanth, but there is no life of Shivaram Karanth. Likewise in Maharashtra there would be people like this. So I think it's very important, you're right, to revive these exemplary figures, and many of them are forgotten. Tagore, Gandhi and Ambedkar are lucky that at least they're discussed and debated, sometimes wrongly and with imperfect knowledge. But there are many other remarkable figures in the 19th and 20th century who brought India face to face with the modern world, who challenged our ancient prejudices. It's very important to recognize that the greatness of people like Gandhi, Tagore, Narayana Guru and Ambedkar, if they did not think my country is perfect. They loved their country, but they knew their country had flaws. The way we treated Dalits, the way we treated women, the way we did not embrace modern science. And they brought us to the modern world by reforming ourselves, not just by throwing the British out. That's only part of the story. Renewal and reform within Indian society is what these people did, and we still need that. To say, "Gar se kaho hum Vande Mataram, Bharat Mata ki jai," is not going to make India great. Having better hospitals would have made India great and would have contained COVID better. Running better schools would have not made our primary education so disgraceful outside states like Kerala, Tamil Nadu, and most of this. So kind of simplistic pride in your country is not enough. It must go hand in hand with recognizing your country had not achieved its hopes and its aspirations and its ambitions. And that is what the great people like Narayana Guru did. Was they turned the critical gaze within and to make us a more humane place.
So before handing over to Barun, since you challenged Malayalis and I happen to be one from Kerala living in Darjeeling, this is my research on Narayana Guru, Vision from the Margin. And this has also been translated into Nepali, the life story of Narayana Guru. Thank you, sir.
Please post it.
Thank you, Father, and thank you. This is an interesting question by Somasri Sarkar. Since we were talking about religious fundamentalism, not just in India but across the world, why has there been, she asked, why has there been the rise of, what is the reason behind the rise of religious fundamentalism in the world? What could be the reason?
No, I think insecurity, future historians will have to research it. I'm not a historian of religious fundamentalism, so I can only provide very temporary and tentative answers. But future historians will have to, the role of nation states, of religious pride, of insecurity, in times of economic insecurity. When you don't have a job, at least you get the vicarious pleasure of beating up on someone who's not from your religion. The kind of things that are spoke by demagogues and ideologues. So, but I can certainly observe it. A future historian will have to say, why is there a rise of, why is Kerala, why is there a rise of religious rivalries in Kerala which did not exist before? But the important thing is that it is deeply, we must as citizens recognize that it is deeply destructive and does us no good in the long.
Yes, sir. So this is a very interesting question because I think the entire people, entire students and entire people of Northeast actually want to know, and that is like Puspa Norim asks, why is the history of Northeast India continuously absent, from the mainstream Indian? You never read of the Nagara history, you never read about any of the things, and Northeast remains misrepresented, unrepresented in mainstream Indian history. Why is that?
Well, first of all, though the Northeast has suffered disproportionately, other regions have also suffered. The South has also suffered. We know much more about the Mughals than we know about their contemporaries in southern India, for example, right? But the Northeast, I think there are some outstanding historians in the Northeast. I mean, I could name some. I mean, there is David Simley in Shillong, who is the first state historian. There are people in Assam who have done outstanding work. And I myself, by writing about people like Irwin, even in my book, India After Gandhi, if you read it, you'll find that the Naga story is as important as the Kashmir story. The previous historians only talk about descent in Kashmir, but you will see the whole Naga and Mizoram story in my book. If the pandemic had not happened, in February I was using Nagaland. Actually, late February, March, I was going to give a lecture in Guwahati, at IIT Guwahati, and then I was going to go to Nagaland because I had not visited Nagaland. Nagaland and Mizoram were the only two states in the Union I had not visited. And once the fact that, so I think it's very important, travel is very important to expand your understanding. And I always tell young students, when you grow up and you want to travel to the West, you want to go to London and Paris, but don't forget to discover your own country. One of the joys of being a historian in India is that you can travel. I mean, I said there are only two states in India I have not been to, and some states I know quite well. I mean,
in the first line to the introduction to your book, Anthropologists among the Marxists, among all the essays, you have written, and I quote, inside every thinking Indian there is a Gandhian and a Marxist struggling for supremacy, unquote. Is Gandhian philosophy or contradiction of Marxist philosophy, or both hold similar ethos? If there are shared values, can the twin ever meet?
No, so that's a kind of a line designed to attract attention. Obviously, a writer wants to start the line, the first line, you must draw the person immediately. So I put it out as a teaser. Obviously, it was written 20 years ago. It's probably not so relevant anymore. It happened to be relevant in my own life that I was inspired by Marx and by Gandhi in reverse order. And I'm not a Marxist. I'm anti-communist. I believe the Soviet experiment was a disastrous experiment. But that Marx himself was a great thinker. I'm not a Gandhian, I have explained, but so, and of course I've talked about many other people. In this conversation we talked about many other people like Ambedkar, Narayan Guru, or whom we can go of. And yes, of course, yes, in many ways Gandhi and Marx are incompatible, particularly on the question of violence. And on that I stand totally with Gandhi. Marx believed that violence was the midwife of history, and Marxists like Lenin and Mao believe that violence can have an emancipatory, liberatory role in transforming human societies, and I deeply disagree. I believe violence only begets more violence. And on that I stand with Gandhi. But Marx is an analyst of social conflict. Marx is a student of technology. Marx is the first great, we live in the age, we are talking about through Zoom or through Google. That means I'm conversing many people. Marx is the first thinker to recognize that technology was an autonomous social actor that could transform societies. As in the profoundly original thinker. And that part of Marx appeals to me, not communism, not his dogmatism, not his worship of violence, but his sociology, his social analysis, his understanding how conflicts arise in society, how groups organize themselves. So in that sense, he is a great modern thinker and indispensable for any social scientist or historian seeking to understand the modern.
Sir, Dr. Binayak Sundas from Center for Himalayan Studies, he is an assistant professor there, and an ardent researcher. who maintains actually the Center for Himalayan Studies maintain a user archive, and they're working towards working on creation, documentation, and archiving of all historical materials from the Eastern Himalayan regions. So Dr. Sundas writes, what is the point of historical work, the endless hours in archives, going back and forth with drafts between peers, reviewing your work, when the historical narrative is completely held hostage by news anchors and politicians? I remember a brilliant conference at Ayodhya in JNU many years ago that very strongly challenged the existence of the temple structure under the mosque. However, such work rarely breaks out of the confines of the seminar halls and edited bodies.
Well, I'll answer the question, but first of all, I'd like to, say that I'm a child of the Himalaya myself. I was born and raised in Uttarakhand. My first book was on Uttarakhand. I remain in close touch with the Himalaya. I have just prepared for publication the definitive history of the Chipko movement by the great Uttarakhandi historian Shekhar Pathak, Dr. Shekhar Pathak, long time professor at my university, which will be published by Bowman and Black in a few months. So it's lovely to be in conversation with a fellow historian of the Himalaya. Now you see, what use is your work? That is something, that frustration must set aside. You must not think you are in the business of transforming. You are in the business of alerting society to certain pitfalls, of expanding the education, their knowledge, their understanding of their past. It may have a use, it may be misused, that you can't say. The person who invented the world, for example, the person who invented the World Wide Web, Tim Berners-Lee, the computer World Wide Web is used for good things, for bad things. So, as long as you're truthful to your calling, you do your research seriously, sincerely, you communicate it in newspapers. I believe a historian must communicate in newspapers because a historian can. A physicist cannot. The complexity of research in physics or biology cannot be communicated in a newspaper article, but a historian can. A historian must write in other languages, not just in English, but in Nepali or Bengali or Hindi or whatever. And what use or misuse is made of your work is beyond it. I don't think that will happen inevitably. Now you have WhatsApp history, that rules people's minds, and one must find a way of, challenging it. But someone working, say that now there are so many people who are working on a vaccine for COVID. Some of them will fail. Of the 300 people working, 299 will fail. Doesn't mean they should not work. Some of them will, be badly used, will be carelessly used by medical staff. You will find that happen. So, science and scholarship must be its own justification. It must be pursued seriously, rigorously, honestly, truthfully. In your work, don't make up things, even if other people are making up things. That's what I would tell you. It may not be very small consolation for your colleague, the Himalayan scholar, that but that's how I see.
Thank you, sir. There is a question from Mr. Mrinal Das. He asks, what is the place of non-believer people in fast non-believers? Probably. I think he's talking about atheists in the sense in the fast-growing religious fundamentalism in the world.
So if you look at ancient Indian philosophy, we had a robust atheistic tradition. There's the late Bengali philosopher the Marxist David Prasad Chattopadhyay wrote a famous book on Lokayana, on atheistic traditions in Indian philosophy. Gandhi had a great atheist follower called Gora. Again, young people who have access to the internet. There's a little book available online, called An Atheist with Gandhi by Gora. Gora was a social reformer in Andhra Pradesh, devoted to the emancipation of the Dalits, who opened rural schools, and he was an atheist, yet he was a follower of Gandhi. And Gandhi said, if you follow truth, I accept you. I would say truth is God, not God is truth. And so, in my view, personal faith would include a belief in no God. But it should not be imposed on others. The problem becomes with aggressive atheism. In the West, you have aggressive atheism. You have thinkers like the late Christopher Hitchens or Richard Dawkins, who have contemned and mocked all faiths and often distort them. I think that is not a productive use of atheism either. I mean, if you look at faiths, Christianity, Islam, Hinduism have promoted violence. Buddhism has promoted violence. But so is atheism. What is the Soviet Union and Communist China? So, but at the same time, if a personal faith is atheistic, Indian tradition has always accepted it, as in Lokayata. And Gandhi himself, the most religious of modern Indians, had an atheist as one of his devoted followers. So do read this book, An Atheist with Gandhi by Gora, you will find it all right. It's a short book about 40 pages.
Okay. So I would like to merge these two questions from Sashi Singh and Mohit Maheswara in the sense that religious fundamentalism, no matter where we look, I mean, whether it's a religious fundamentalism in terms of religious fundamentalism in terms of Christian right groups like NSC and Isaac Moeba, in its constitution it uses the symbol of Christ itself, So whatever, in whatever form religious fundamentalism, do they work towards distortion? Do they influence? They have huge influence towards the distortion of history. How would you react to that question?
Yes, of course they do. Absolutely they do. I mean, a historian, as I said, I said a historian must not be a member of a political party. Right. That does not mean a historian does not go and vote. So when I go and vote, I go and vote for a local election, a state election, and I vote for someone. And there I have to choose. I have to choose between two of the parties. Likewise, a historian is may or maybe atheist, he may be a person of faith. But in their professional work, they must be agnostic. No religion must include in their work because religion is distorted. There is no Christian history, there is no Muslim history, there is no Hindu history, there is no Buddhist history, there is only history. Right. I mean, Marxist history, for example, somebody mentioned JNU. And I tell you JNU was a guard or a fort. The JNU history department was a guard or fort of Marxist history. It was also intolerant, by the way. Non-Marxist historians could not take JNU. Marxism is, but if you replace Marxist history with a narrow-minded, dogmatic view, but at least has some credibility because they have some respect for facts. Not enough, but they have some. If you replace Hindu history, that is even worse. So I think history is agnostic to ideologies and particularly to religious conviction. It's hard. You may be a deeply believing Hindu in your personal life or a deeply believing Muslim in your personal life. But set it aside when you go and do your research. C.V. Raman was a Hindu. He was not an atheist. C.V. Raman was a Hindu. But when he went to his laboratory, he was not a Hindu physicist. He was a physicist. That's why he got the Nobel Prize. Right. So I think absolutely. I mean, the example of the BJP. If the BJP has too much influence on history, they will distort it. The NSCN of Nagaland, there is no Christian history of Nagaland. There is only a history of Nagaland. Full stop. Right. Christianity has a part in it, but the part that Christianity has played in Nagaland is complex and complicated, and sometimes emancipatory, sometimes actually has produced intolerance and hatred. Right. So I think absolutely religious fundamentalism has a profoundly distorting influence on history. There is no question. But so did ideologies like Marxism in the past. That also I want to
This is a question put forward by Dr. Babu Joseph. He is the Vice Principal, Morning Session of Selection College and the former HOD of our department. And he asked, how do you assess Nehru's vision on foreign policy vis-a-vis non-aligned? Is it relevant today considering the unipolar character of the world? Do you think, the abrogation of Article 370 and the transformation of Jammu?
The Congress government bungled on Kashmir. These bungled much worse. The only Indian Prime Minister who has an honorable record on Kashmir was the late Atal Bihari Vajpayee.
Thank you, sir. So I would like to now take up a few questions from YouTube. I mean, we have viewers there who are posting questions through Top Chat. And Gargi Saha case writes, India is adopting privatization and globalization very quickly, but at the same time, it is trying to be a Hindu state. Does globalization and probably, a Hindu state go side by side?
Well, what the pandemic is going to do is to put a break on globalization all over the world. So that question is now slightly redundant because obviously you still have trade with different parts of the world, but movement of people will be much more difficult, and also movement of goods because you'll be worried whether they're contaminated and want to protect the health of their citizens. But Hindutva and cosmopolitanism, universalism does not go hand in hand. Just have to read Tagore. Again, I'll be recommending some books for people, articles and books to read. I would strongly recommend to every Indian Rabindranath Tagore's short book called Nationalism, which are based on lectures he gave in Japan and the United States during the First World War, to show how you can blend patriotism with universalism. And what we are witnessing today is a jingoism which will destroy us even in terms of our scientific progress. I talked about the fact that there is no Hindu history. It's even less of a Hindu science. This kind of absurd belief that Hindus invented everything is really damaging our scientific institutions, right? So, you need complex interconnected work. Knowledge is really important. And if our universities are made hostage to political parties and religious ideologies, it will be a disaster.
Barun, could I take on here? Sir,
Please,
in this connection, I was reading, as I said, Abraham Virali's The First Ring, and he makes an observation there that one of the reasons why after the glorious Mauryan Empire and the first 1,000 years, 500 BC and 500 CE, the decline happens is because the Roman Empire declined. And because there is a lot of trade, and India was an urban flourishing place for those, and because of the decline of Rome and the Roman civilization empire, it impacted Indian progress, one side. And now, to carry forward, what is happening in the globalization decline that you are referring to, is this going to have a repercussion carrying on from the question that was raised? In terms of, on the one side, there is a projection that we are post-COVID going to emerge even after this little lull, and even come on top of China in terms of, suppose that kind of an argument is there, or projection, and on the other side, would it be something like a repetition of what happened in the Gupta age? Hello, sir. Hello. Barun, can you hear me? Hello.
We'll just wait for a while. He's trying to log in.
I think there's some problem there in Kunur.
You can log on.
Yeah.
Right? Yes. So yes, he's trying to log on. He just lost connection. If we have more questions, I'd like to request all the participants to just jot it down on the chat column. If you are in Google Meet and if you are in YouTube also, you can just use the top chat. Let's wait for a second.
Barun sir.
Yes, sir.
There is a text message sent to you by Dr. Bunji. She lost the connection. She has sent a question there in your WhatsApp.
Oh, okay, sir. Okay, I'll take it.
I think we could hear rain there. It looks like it's raining out there in Munur, probably. Did you try to call him, Barun? Just give a call to him.
Thank you, sir. Welcome back.
Hi, sir. Welcome.
Yes, Father, I think you were saying something before we broke.
Yeah, and I was just posing, taking on from the previous question, whether, as historians have recorded, a connection between the decline of Roman Empire and the Indian prosperity coming down in the end of the first part of the first millennium. Similarly, would the kind of decline that is projected of the American power vis-a-vis China emerging going to affect positively or negatively the Indian future? Did you get, sir?
Oh, he's,
Sir, it's muted. Sir, it's muted.
Sir, you have to unmute yourself.
yeah.
Now we can hear you. Yeah. Did you hear me, sir?
So even before the pandemic began, Indian economy has started declining.
So you are again gone muted. So you have gone muted again.
Yes.
Yeah, now okay. Yeah.
So even before the pandemic, the Indian economy has started declining. We were growing at 8% a year through much of the, between say 2002, 2003, 2015, 16, and then we have declined to, before the pandemic, we're down at 4% a year. And this even maybe an overestimate, because this is just question we raised about the government's GDP figures. And the pandemic has devastated our economy. It has devastated other aspects of our life too. And recovery will be very hard. And in this kind of context, to polarize people on religious lines, I think would hurt our economic prospects even more. And as you rightly say, America will become more protectionist, trade will become more difficult. We are having difficulties with China, caused mostly by China. So I think in this kind of context, if you want, what happened? If I may say a little bit more about Marxism. I am not though I detest Hindutva and religious fundamentalism, I am not an admirer of Marxism. I am not a Marxism. Marxism has, in India particularly, has a knee-jerk opposition to private entrepreneurs. Narasimha Rao and Manmohan Singh in the 1990s brought India out of endemic mass poverty. But Narasimha Rao and Manmohan Singh in the 1990s, followed by Deve Gowda, followed by Vajpayee, emancipated hundreds of millions of Indians out of poverty. It could have been done better. There could have been more social services. There could have been less crony capitalism. But the public sector economy of the Marxists would have destroyed India further. So that entrepreneurship led to this kind of emancipation of ordinary Indians, particularly in southern and western India, less so in northeast India. Maybe 200 million Indians were lifted out of poverty by the reforms unleashed by Narasimha Rao and Manmohan Singh. And now all that progress is being destroyed by the bad economic policies of the Modi government, and now secondly the pandemic. So to restore this, to many people who had come out of poverty will slip back into poverty. Many people who had got employed by economic liberalization are now losing their jobs. So this is a very difficult and complex task, and it needs real experts and advisors. One of the great weaknesses of the Narendra Modi government is that they have a contempt for scholars, scientists and advisors. The best economists are there. Arvind Subramanian, Raghuram Rajan, Urjit Patel, Viral Acharya. You need people like that back. You need to say, I will not think I have all the answers. I may be Prime Minister, but I'm not an expert on the economy. I need a good finance minister, I need a good Reserve Bank, I need someone who will speak the truth to me about how difficult the real issue problem is. Now, unfortunately, this is unlikely to happen, not only because of Modi, but because of the incompetence of the Congress party. As long as Rahul Gandhi is heading the Congress party, Modi knows he will win every election. So he doesn't really care about the economy. He only wants to worry about winning elections. But this is something which I think is really going to hurt us. The pandemic is going to, we were already sinking as an economy. Now with protectionism everywhere, we will find that all the gains we made from 1991 onwards. And as I said, there are lots of young Indians in universities who do not understand the complexity of modern economics. They think capitalism is bad. No. Some capitalists are bad, some capitalists are greedy, but there is a lesson of the 20th century, just as there is a political lesson, which is religious fundamentalism destroys societies. There is an economic lesson, namely excessive state control stifles economies. You need entrepreneurship and to grow. That's why we grew from 1990s onwards. That's why hundreds of millions of Indians were lifted out of poverty, and that now again they are going back into poverty.
Thanks, sir. I would like to take up another question by Dr. Gunjit Arora. He is an associate professor with the Department of English Selection College. He writes, what are we witnessing today are huge structural and systematic changes at every level in the Indian polity and society. These changes can be envisaged in the BJP party structure also. What is reminiscent of the rigid centralization undertaken by Indira Gandhi in the Congress party? The counter to that, ironically, was the emergence of the right wing and regional parties. What possible scenarios can we see or hope in the future?
Well, it's impossible for a historian to predict. One can only use the knowledge of the past to speak about the present. But my knowledge of the past tells me that India has gone through bad periods before and come out of that. So we can come out of this, the emergency was mentioned, we can come out of this too. But it will require a focused, revitalized opposition, and I don't believe that the Congress as led by Rahul Gandhi can provide it. I believe that someone who has so conspicuously failed in taking on Modi in 2014, 2019, he has no place in politics. If you score 5 zeros in a row, you are thrown out of the test team. If you are captain of the test team and you lose 5-0 in a series, you are thrown out. A CEO who runs his company to the ground is replaced by somebody else. So it is absolutely scandalous that the Congress party is so beholden to the family. That hurts not just the Congress party, it hurts India. Because as I said in my previous answer, Rahul Gandhi is Narendra Modi's best friend, symbolically speaking. So I think we need a revitalized opposition. We need a new leadership of the Congress party. We need federal parties to be strong. I think in some ways what the DMK is doing in Tamil Nadu, what the Communists are doing in Kerala, what the TMC is doing in Maharashtra, they are providing a robust opposition. Not really the Congress party, because the leadership is incompetent and nepotistic. India is now moved on. India does not want a fifth generation dynasty. They don't want you to say, I'm so. Priyanka Gandhi last week said, I'm Indira Gandhi's granddaughter. What kind of nonsensical remark is that for a politician? So I think the Congress party is as guilty of eroding and under its present leadership the Congress party is almost as much of a threat to Indian democracy as Narendra Modi and the BJP.
So I would like to take a few more questions because it's already been 12:30 and I'm sure you must also tired. This is a question by Nihal Mangrati, and he says, taking the idea of state as imagined community, as argued by Benedict Anderson, could we say that during this pandemic, we would think ourselves instituting the national or inter-border?
Well, again, I think what the pandemic is going to do is to reduce the influence of internationalism, reinforce the importance of nations and states, make states more strong vis-a-vis their citizens, make them more authoritarian. That's what's happening in Russia, that's what's happening in Turkey, that's what's happening in America, that's what's happening with us. So I think the pandemic has an enormous economic cost, but it also has an economic cost to democracy. I think this might change in America if Trump loses. I think the loss of Trump will not only lead to a more democratic improved America, a more internationalist America, a more outward-looking America. So I think people who believe in democracy and pluralism and universalism, even if they're not American citizens, should be hoping Trump loses in the forthcoming election.
So I just wanted to, there is this question on YouTube that has been asked by Sanjini Sarkar. He says, has the CAA been misinterpreted?
No, it hasn't been. Not at all. Because it is deliberately spiteful towards Muslims. To say anyone but a Muslim can get refuge, and then to ally with the NRC, the repeated threat by the Home Minister, our chronology समझिए, पहले ये फिर वो. I mean, I know how vulnerable my Muslim fellow citizens are. That's why I came on the street. Absolutely not. It is a pernicious, vicious, discriminatory act, a spiteful, which is totally antithetical to not just our constitution, to any sense of civility or decency. If it had Muslims in it, we would have said all refugees, regardless of religion, if they can show that they are victims of religious persecution, they can come to India, yes, it would not. Everyone would accept it. But by leaving Muslims out deliberately, it sends a signal to 200 million Indians. You are there not by right, but by suffering. We will decide whether we want you or not.
Thank you, sir. So, let's move on to environmentalism and environmental history. I mean, you have written extensively on it. In fact, yours was a pioneering work in the field. And interestingly, your father worked at Forest Research Institute in Dehradun, and you, as you said yourself, you grew up in the hills. Did this play an important role in developing environmentalist in you?
No, not yet. Firstly, I'm not an environmentalist. I'm not a Gandhian. I'm not an environmentalist. I'm a historian of the environment. Right. And of course, I grew up in Dehradun. I was very rich in bird life. I was interested in, a little bit in that. But it really came by accident. It came because I started studying the Chipko movement, and I met the great leader of the Chipko movement, Chandiya Prasad Bhatt, who really, my meeting with him in my 20s, not really my parentage or where I grew up, that made me a student of the environment.
Yes, sir. There is a question related to this. That's why I was asking. I mean, this is from by Jitmain Angchuk from NEHU. He asks, what is your view of post-humanism? Has humanity failed in its capacity as the guardian of this planet? Are we looking towards imminent human extinction in a few hundred years or perhaps 1,000 years? Have we failed the planet at large?
So that's a very large philosophical question and I'm incompetent to answer.
Thank you, sir. This is another question by Anwar Islam on North Bengal University. He asks, what is the role of environmental history in environmental activism? How does it help in solving the problem of environment? And how can environmental history help in inculcating a sense of responsibility towards environment among people?
Well, that is for the activists and the consumer of environmentalists decide. A historian cannot prescribe. A historian is not an activist. A historian is not a policy analyst. A historian is just a student of the past in all its complexity. I don't believe, for example, that's why historians do not advise government. So you write, you do research, you put it out in the public domain, you give talks, you write newspaper articles, and young people who want a better earth, a better future will read your work, and they will decide what to do. You must not tell. You must not prescribe.
Thank you, sir. Ultimately, one last question. Mr. Arvind Ghosh, Calcutta University, right? You have written a number of books on cricket. And as a writer and as an enthusiast, if you were to describe an era in cricket as the golden era of cricket in India, which period would it be?
I think probably India today has the best ever team. But for someone of my age, 1971 is a very special year. That's the year we beat England for the first time in England, and that's also the year we beat the West Indies led by Gary Sobers in the West Indies. But for every cricket lover, it's like their youth who are special. But until the generation for me it was Bishop Baby and Surya Gavaskar. For my son it is Sachin Tendulkar. For my grandson who knows who it will be. Now, just since it's a question of cricket, my next book is a book on cricket. It's called The Commonwealth of Cricket, and it's a kind of my life as a cricket fan. All the cricketers I've seen, admired, and interacted with over the last 50 years. Kind of a memoir of my life in cricket. But it's always there's a great English writer called Ian Bevan, and he said, there are no cricketers like those seen through 12-year-old eyes. So for me, for my uncle, Mankad Hazare, for me, as a baby, my son, Dravid, Anil Kumble. Right. So that's how it is. Every generation has its own golden age, its own kind of time.
Thank you so much, sir. Thanks so much, for appearing me and answering all our questions. I mean, I know it has been very tiring for you, and thank you so much. There are still a lot of questions that are coming, but we will, stick this as the last question. I'd just like to remind both our views on YouTube and on Google Meet. We have just posted a link for feedback. Your feedback is very important to us, and so give us your feedback. Now I'd like to request Father Babu to please give his vote of thanks. Father Babu.
Thank you, Mr. Babu. Thank you so much, Dr. Raman Chandra. You have been so kind to us to accept our invitation and to come for this interactive section, which has been a very great thing for us. Now I go to my formal vote of thanks. Respected Reverend Dr. George Kadambi, the Chief Patron and Chairman of the Organizing Committee and the Principal of Regional College, Reverend Dr. George Bhagadina, Vice Chairman and Vice Principal of Arts and Humanities, Reverend Father George Ajubian, the ITBC Coordinator, Mr. Victor Daksha, Dean of Arts and Humanities, Ms. Manisha Pradhan, PhD of the Department of History, the co-convener, Mrs. Pinky Naidu, the co-convener, and Mr. Bharani Roy, and chief organizer of the webinar. Today is a red letter day in the history of the Regional College, as it is blessed with the presence of the eminent scholarly personality in the person of Dr. Raman Chandra Guha. Dear sir, it is a great privilege to have you in our midst. Thank you for accepting our invitation and agreeing to interact with us. We are highly impressed with your clarity of expression, erudition, intellectual astuteness, and with disarming simplicity. You being a sociologist and historian, a rare combination indeed, have enlightened us with your profound ideas on secularism, vis-a-vis pluralism,
and democracy, and have instilled us the hope that they are here to stay in spite of some serious attacks in the recent years. We are very much impressed by your view that while there are many reasons for the decline of pluralism or secularism, it is up to the religious to make amends according to the signs of the times. It is consoling to note that while there are political parties who are not fully adhering to secularism as a principle, there were secular politicians who had shown us the way. Your own enthusiasm in cricket also has enriched us, and our minds really drawn to you because you keep up with intellectual activity and sports together. Thank you so much, sir. Very, very thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm just grateful that the connection mostly worked.
Yeah, really. we have been raising our hearts to the Almighty for that.
Yes.
That's not in our control.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. I mean, it's extraordinary. It's used. In depth to you. Thank you so much, sir. And thank you. Thank you so much, sir. And thank you to all our participants. I mean, it was a marathon run, and it was an extraordinary. I mean, it was a profound. I mean, we learned a lot, and we would hopefully request Dr. Ramachandran to one day grace our college personally, and
Thank you, sir.
And Darjeeling Hills, and so that we can host him and we can talk with him. Yes, thank you so much. And thank you all.
Sir and Barun, if I may have a last word.
Yes, please go ahead.
We should honor all these questions. We will send it to you, sir, just for your record too, and it will definitely, I'm sure, inspire you to make some, articles or to respond to our situation. That's one.
Yes, yes.
And the second thing is, from my personal note and on behalf of our entire management, thanks to Barun and the entire department, and all of you, my dear friends, for having joined us. And Father Babu, thank you for your vote of thanks. Bye.
Thank you, sir, once again.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Love you, sir. Proud of you, sir. Proud of you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you to all who have
It will complete it, otherwise it will not be nice. I would like to acknowledge the leadership and encouragement provided by the President of George Sarakin, the principal of the college, who has been at our side in times of crisis and need. His timely advice and corrections have greatly contributed to the success of this webinar. Dr. George Champakatinal, Vice Principal of Arts and Humanities, needs to be acknowledged for his availability and guidance. He has always been at our side whenever the organizing team met with difficulties and hurdles. The Department of History has been ably directed by Ms. Manisha Pradhan for the last 1 year. Her youthful enthusiasm, spirit of initiative, and willingness to work hard have made the department to achieve great heights in academic performance and co-curricular activities. In her willingness to put up with hardship and difficulties that made this webinar another success. Together with her, I acknowledge the contribution made by Mrs. Deepthi Naidu, the co-convener of this seminar. She too has been working day and night to make this event a memorable one. It is necessary to acknowledge the contribution of Mr. Varun Roy, who has been the initiator, moderator, and chief organizer of this seminar. It is his hard work, vision, and power of persuasion that made this webinar a reality. I, on behalf of the management and the faculty, extend words of deep appreciation and congratulations for the great work done with efficiency and perfection. The tech team of Salesian College, headed by Mr. Veerabhata Subba, requires a special mention, as without their help, it would not have been possible to reach out to a vast number of participants. I appreciate their willingness to cooperate with all to make this event an efficacious one. Last but not the least, I would like to thank the teams and all the members of the faculty of Salesian College for their cooperation and collaboration. And I would like to thank all the participants without your active presence in the webinar who could not have been a member of our body. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you, all of us. And yes, I think we'll have to bid for farewell, and let's hope that we'll meet again. And we also have another webinar coming up on 23rd of August, and Dr. Swatasita Sarkar, Director of the Center for Himalayan Studies, will be joining us. So thank you all, and see you then. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, sir.
Thanks, Manisha.
Thank you.